The first time Tracy Robert touched Kang Ha-jun's face, she knew she was invisible. She stood in his big mansion bathroom in Gwangju, steam curling around her like a veil, her dark brown fingers trembling as she guided a warm cloth across his closed eyelids. He sat perfectly still on the marble bench, his head tilted back, water droplets clinging to the sharp angles of his jaw. The bathroom smelled of eucalyptus and something expensive she couldn't name. "You missed a spot," he said quietly. "Near my left temple." Tracy flinched. "Sorry, sir. I'll be more careful." She adjusted her grip, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 weeks into this job, and she still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not wrong in a dangerous way, wrong in a way she couldn't explain. Like a word sitting on the tip of her tongue that refused to form. Kang Ha-jun was blind. That's what the agency told her. That's what the contract said. That's why a 26-year-old Ugandan nurse with no connections and an expired work visa had been offered a salary that made her eyes water when she read the number. Caretaker wife, the agency woman had called it. Legal on paper, professional in practice. He needs someone to assist with daily routines, someone who won't sell stories to the press. Tracy had signed without hesitation. She had no choice. Back home in Kampala, her younger sister, Kissa, was waiting for surgery. A tumor pressing against her spine, growing larger every month. Tracy couldn't afford the operation. Their mother had sold everything, the land, the goats, even their grandmother's gold earrings, the ones that had survived 3 generations. It wasn't enough. They had lost their father at a younger age, so Tracy had come to South Korea on a medical exchange program, worked double shifts at a clinic in Seoul, and prayed for a miracle. The miracle came in the form of a manila envelope slipped under her door at 2 in the morning. Now she was here, married on paper to a man who couldn't see her face. She finished wiping his temples and stepped back, folding the cloth neatly. Ha-jun opened his eyes, pale, clouded, staring at nothing. "You're nervous," he said. "I'm fine, sir." Your breathing changed, faster, shallow. He tilted his head slightly as if listening to something beyond her words. "You do that when you're uncomfortable, or when you're lying." Tracy's stomach dropped. "I'm not lying. I didn't say you were." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "I said you do that when you are. There's a difference." She didn't know how to respond, so she said nothing. That was another thing she'd learned in 3 weeks. She had learned that stillness was safer than speech. Ha-jun rose from the bench, his movements fluid and precise for a man who supposedly couldn't see. He reached for the towel hanging exactly where it always hung, wrapped it around his shoulders, and walked toward the door without hesitation. Tracy watched him go, her brow furrowed. For a blind man, he never stumbled, never reached out to feel for walls, never asked her to guide him through doorways. She told herself it was muscle memory. He'd lived in the mansion for years. Of course he knew every corner, every step, every shadow. But late at night, when the city lights of Gwangju glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Tracy sat alone in her small room on the east wing. She replayed moments that didn't add up. The way he'd caught a falling glass last Tuesday, snatching it from the air before it shattered, his hand moving faster than thought. The way he'd commented on the color of her dress yesterday. "That shade of yellow suits you," he'd said. And she'd frozen, wondering if someone had told him what she was wearing. The way his clouded eyes sometimes seemed to focus, just for a second. Just long enough to make her doubt everything. But doubt was a luxury Tracy couldn't afford. She needed this job. She needed the money wiring to Kampala every 2 weeks. She needed her sister to survive. So she pushed the questions down, locked them in a box inside her chest, and kept her head low. What Tracy didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that Kang Ha-jun had been watching her since the moment she walked through his door. He'd seen the way she counted her steps, memorizing the layout of his home in case she needed to run. He'd seen the photograph she kept hidden in her pillowcase, a young girl with Tracy's same wide smile lying in a hospital bed. He'd seen her cry exactly once, in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, her shoulders shaking silently as she clutched her phone and whispered prayers in Luganda. He'd seen everything. And somewhere between the watching and the waiting, a change stirred in him, one he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Kang Ha-jun was the silent, ruthless king of Gwangju's underworld. His blindness was a lie, a mask he'd worn for 5 years to deceive his enemies, to make them underestimate him, to let them believe he was weak while he dismantled their empires piece by piece. No one knew the truth. Not his board of directors, not his rivals, not even his own family. But now, for the first time, his mask was becoming a cage. Because every time Tracy touched his face with those gentle hands, every time she spoke to him like he was human instead of a monster, every time she thought he couldn't see her kindness, he fell deeper into something he couldn't control, and tonight, everything was about to change. Tracy was in the kitchen, heating soup she'd made from scratch, when the front door exploded inward. 6 months earlier, Tracy Robert had stood in a hospital corridor in Kampala, watching her sister's doctor shake his head. "The tumor is growing," Dr. Okello said, his voice heavy with the weight of words he'd spoken too many times. "Without surgery, she has maybe a year, maybe less." Tracy's mother, Grace, collapsed against the wall, her wail echoing through the sterile hallway. But Tracy didn't cry. She couldn't. If she started, she might never stop. "How much?" Tracy asked. "For the surgery? The specialists? The aftercare?" Dr. Okello sighed. "The total cost comes to $2.3 billion, the doctor explained calmly. Tracy did the math in her head. Her nursing salary, her mother's pension, the money they'd already borrowed from relatives who had nothing to spare. It wasn't even close. That night, she sat beside Kissa's bed, holding her sister's thin hand. Kissa was 15, with their father's stubborn chin and their mother's gentle eyes. She'd wanted to be a teacher, she'd wanted to travel, she'd wanted to fall in love and have children and grow old surrounded by grandchildren who would beg her for stories. Now she might not see 16. "You're making that face," Kissa whispered, her voice weak but teasing. "The one where you're planning something crazy." "I'm not planning anything." "Liar." Kissa squeezed her hand. "Whatever you're thinking, don't. I'm not worth—" "Don't!" Tracy's voice cracked. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." Kissa fell silent. Outside the window, Kampala hummed with life. Motorbikes honking, vendors calling, children laughing. The world kept spinning, indifferent to the girl fading in room 114. Tracy made her decision that night. She applied to every international medical program she could find. She begged, she borrowed. She sold her nursing textbooks, her phone, her only pair of good shoes. She got a spot in a Korean exchange program, unpaid, but it came with a work visa. 3 months later, she landed in Seoul with $250 and a heart full of desperate hope. The work was brutal. 12-hour shifts at a clinic that treated her like furniture. A shared apartment with 6 other foreign workers, all of them running from something, all of them chasing something else. She sent every spare one back to Kampala, watching the hospital bills shrink by inches while the tumor grew by miles. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Then came the envelope. Tracy found it under her door on a Tuesday night. After a shift that had left her so exhausted she could barely see straight. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address, a time, and a number that made her sit down hard on her thin mattress. The number was more than she'd make in 10 years of nursing. She should have been suspicious. She should have asked questions. But desperation has a way of silencing doubt, and Tracy was drowning in desperation. The agency office was in a sleek building in Gangnam, all glass and chrome and women in expensive suits. They explained the arrangement with clinical precision. Kang Ha-jun, 32 years old, CEO of Kang Industries, blind since a car accident 5 years ago. He had been involved in a car crash that cost the life of his driver and his eyes, wealthy beyond imagination. Paranoid about staff selling information to competitors or tabloids, he needed a caretaker, someone to assist with personal routines, someone trustworthy. "Why marriage?" Tracy asked. "Legal protection," the woman said smoothly. "For both parties. A spouse cannot be compelled to testify, cannot sell stories without consequences. It's a business arrangement, nothing more." And he agreed to this? To marrying a stranger? Mr. Kang values privacy above all else. He interviewed 37 candidates before selecting you. Tracy blinked. He selected me? How? He's never met me. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Kang has his methods. Tracy should have run. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, that this was too easy, too perfect, too much like a trap. But then she thought of Kissa, of her mother's hollow eyes, of the doctor's careful words, maybe a year, maybe less. She signed the contract. The wedding was nothing, a courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses she'd never seen before. Ha-jun wore dark glasses and a perfectly tailored suit, revealing his tattoos. He didn't smile, didn't speak beyond the required words. His hand was cold when he slipped the ring onto her finger. Afterward, a car took her to his mansion in Gwangju. The driver didn't speak. The elevator didn't stop. The doors opened onto a world Tracy had only seen in movies. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, art that probably cost more than her childhood home. Ha-jun was waiting in the living room, standing by the window with his back to her. "Your room is in the East Wing," he said without turning. "Your duties begin tomorrow. Do you have questions?" 1,000. But Tracy only asked one. "Why me?" He was silent for so long she thought he hadn't heard. Then quietly he said, "Because you have something to lose. And I don't." He walked away before she could ask what he meant. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of careful routines and careful distance. 3 weeks of questions she didn't dare ask and answers she wasn't sure she wanted. 3 weeks of falling into a rhythm that felt almost safe. Until tonight. Until the door exploded inward and 3 men in black masks stormed into the mansion, and Tracy realized that nothing about this arrangement had ever been safe at all. The first man through the door moved like smoke, fast, silent, deadly. Tracy dropped the soup pot, hot liquid splashing across the marble floor as she stumbled backward. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. Fear had turned them to stone. "Where is he?" the man demanded in Korean, his voice muffled by the mask. He grabbed Tracy's arm, fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to bruise. "Where is Kang Ha-jun?" I don't know." He shoved her against the counter, and pain exploded through her spine. The other 2 men were already moving through the mansion, overturning furniture, smashing vases, searching for something. Or someone. Tracy's vision blurred with tears. This was how she would die. In a stranger's kitchen, in a country far from home. And Kissa would never get her surgery, and her mother would never know what happened to her. Then she heard it. A sound like wind through dead leaves. A whisper of movement behind her. The man holding her went rigid. His grip loosened. Tracy turned just in time to see Ha-jun standing in the kitchen doorway, his clouded eyes fixed on the intruder, with an intensity that made her blood freeze. "You're in my home," Ha-jun said softly. "That was a mistake." The masked man laughed. "The blind king of Gwangju. I've heard the stories. They say you can't see your hand in front of your face." He pulled a knife from his belt, the blade catching the light. "Let's test that theory." He lunged. What happened next would replay in Tracy's nightmares for months. Ha-Jun moved like water, fluid, inevitable, unstoppable. He sidestepped the knife with millimeters to spare, his hand shooting out to catch the man's wrist. A twist, a crack. The knife clattered to the floor, followed by a scream that didn't sound human. The second attacker rushed in from the living room. Ha-Jun didn't even look. He simply pivoted, driving his elbow into the man's throat with surgical precision. The third tried to run. Ha-Jun caught him by the collar, slammed him against the wall, and held him there with one hand while the man's feet dangled above the floor. "Who sent you?" Ha-Jun's voice was ice. The man whimpered. "I don't, please." "I won't ask again." Park, Sung-ho. He said you were weak, said you couldn't." Ha-Jun released him. The man crumpled to the floor, gasping. For a long moment, the mansion was silent except for the groans of the fallen intruders and Tracy's ragged breathing. She stood frozen against the counter, her mind struggling to process what she'd just witnessed. Then Ha-Jun turned to face her. His eyes weren't clouded anymore. They were clear, sharp and dark, and focused directly on her face with an intensity that stole her breath. "You're hurt," he said. Tracy couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the man she'd thought was blind, the man she'd touched and bathed and spoken to freely, believing he couldn't see her. He could see everything. He'd always been able to see everything. Tracy. He stepped toward her and she flinched. He stopped immediately, something flickering across his face, pain maybe, or regret. "I can explain. You lied to me." Her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. "This whole time, you lied." "I can explain," he said. "Why?" He was silent for a moment. Then, "Because I needed to know if I could trust you." "Trust me?" A hysterical laugh bubbled up from her chest. "You've been watching me, studying me, like I'm some kind of lab experiment you have to study." "No." He took another step, slower this time. "I have been betrayed by the people I trusted the most in the past. I have been hurt on many occasions." Tracy's heart stuttered. She didn't understand what that meant. She didn't want to understand. "I need to leave," she said. "I need to go home." "You can't. We are under a contract." "Watch me." She pushed past him, heading for the door. But Ha-Jun's voice stopped her cold. "Park Sung-ho knows your name now. He knows your face. He knows about your sister in Kampala." His words were quiet, but they hit like bullets. "If you leave this building, you'll be dead before sunrise, and so will everyone you love." Tracy turned slowly. "What?" "The men who came tonight, they saw you here with me." "They don't leave witnesses behind. If you go, you are putting your entire family in danger, including yourself," he said. "Why would they—" She stopped. The answer was obvious, written in the way he was looking at her. "Because they know about the marriage." "How? Who told them?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible. "I've watched you for 3 weeks," Ha-Jun continued. "I've seen you cry for your sister. I've seen you count every one, send every spare cent home. I've seen you treat me with kindness even when you thought I couldn't see it, when you had nothing to gain." He paused. "Do you know how rare that is? In my world?" Tracy shook her head slowly. "I've been surrounded by people who want my money, my power, my name. People who smile while they sharpen knives behind their backs," he said. His voice dropped. "You're the first person in 5 years who looked at me like I was human. I didn't know who you really were." "Exactly." He stepped closer, and this time she didn't flinch. "You saw a blind man who needed help, and you helped him. Not for reward, not for his money, just because you felt it was right." Tracy's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "That doesn't change what you did. You deceived me. You lied to me. You made me believe you were blind all this while. I know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek, gentle, almost reverent. And I will spend the rest of my life making it right, if you let me. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The fallen intruders groaned on the floor. Tracy stood in the wreckage of everything she thought she knew, staring at a man who had lied to her from the beginning. But somewhere beneath the anger and the fear, something else stirred. Something that felt dangerously like hope. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of security briefings and sleepless nights. Ha-Jun's people, and Tracy was beginning to understand just how many people he had, swept through the mansion like ghosts. They removed the unconscious intruders. They repaired the shattered door. They installed new locks, new cameras, new systems that blinked with quiet menace in every corner. Tracy watched it all from the window of her room, her arms wrapped around herself, her mind racing in circles that led nowhere good. She should leave. She knew that. Whatever Ha-Jun said about danger, about Park Sung-ho, about putting her family in danger, she should take her chances and run. Back to Seoul, back to Kampala, back to anywhere that wasn't this gilded cage with its lying master. But every time she reached for her bag, she thought of Kissa's condition. The surgery was scheduled for next month. The money had already been paid. If Tracy disappeared now, if she broke the contract, would Ha-Jun cancel the payment? Would her sister die because Tracy couldn't stomach a few more months of deception? She couldn't risk it. She couldn't risk her. So she stayed. On the third night, Ha-Jun came to her room. He knocked first, 3 soft taps that somehow managed to sound apologetic. Tracy considered ignoring him, but curiosity won over anger, and she opened the door. He looked different without the mask of blindness, more present, more intense. His dark eyes tracked her face with an attention that made her skin prickle. She was wearing her nightgown that looked so tight and revealing. "May I come in? Would it matter if I said no?" A ghost of a smile appeared. "Yes, it would." She stepped aside. Ha-Jun entered slowly, his gaze sweeping her body, the small room, the narrow bed, the sparse furniture, the photograph of Kissa she'd stopped bothering to hide. He picked up the photo, studying it with a mixed expression she couldn't read. "She looks like you," he said. "She's stronger than me." "I doubt that." He set the photo down carefully. "I came to explain, if you're willing to listen." Tracy sat on the edge of the bed, her arms crossed. "I am listening." He remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back like a soldier delivering a report. 5 years ago, I was in a car accident. It wasn't an accident. It was an assassination attempt. My father's rivals wanted to eliminate the heir before he could take power, he said. He paused. They nearly succeeded. I lost my driver in the process. I was in a coma for 3 months. When I woke up, the doctors told everyone I was blind. Permanent damage to the optic nerves. But you weren't. Yes, I was for some period of time, but the damage healed, slowly, secretly. By then I had realized something. His jaw tightened. My blindness made me invisible. People spoke freely around me, revealed secrets, made plans they thought I couldn't see. My enemies underestimated me. My allies showed their true faces. So you kept pretending. For 5 years. I built my empire in the shadows, letting everyone believe I was still blind and weak. It worked, he said, his voice hardened. Until you. Tracy frowned. What do you mean? I mean that for 5 years I've watched people lie to my face, steal from my company, plot against my family. I've seen the worst of human nature, and I've learned to expect nothing else. He met her eyes. Then you walked into my home, and you were kind. Genuinely, impossibly kind. To a man you thought couldn't see it. I was doing my job. No, you were doing more than your job. You talked to me, not at me, to me. You asked about my day. You remembered that I like my coffee with exactly 2 sugars. You sang while you cooked, thinking I couldn't hear, he said. His voice softened. Uganda lullabies, the same ones you used to sing to your sister. Tracy's breath caught. You heard that? I heard everything. And it broke me. He stepped closer, his presence filling the small room. I've spent 5 years pretending to be blind, but you're the first person who made me want to see again. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything Tracy thought she understood. What do you want from me? She whispered. I want you to stay. Not as a caretaker, not as a contract wife. He reached out, his fingers hovering near her face without touching. As someone who knows the truth, all of it, and chooses to stay anyway. And if I can't? If I can't forgive the lies? Then I'll let you go. I'll make sure your sister gets her surgery. I'll make sure you're safe. His hand dropped. But I'm asking you to give me a chance. To prove that the man you thought you knew, the one you were kind to, is still here. Underneath everything else. Tracy stared at him for a long moment. The anger was still there, simmering beneath her ribs. But so was something else, something that had been growing since the first time he'd caught that falling glass, since the first time his clouded eyes had seemed to focus on her face. One chance, she said finally. That's all you get. Ha-Jun's expression didn't change, but he felt relief, or maybe hope. One chance, he agreed. I won't waste it. He left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. Tracy sat alone in the silence, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to. But somewhere deep inside, in a place she'd thought was dead, something was beginning to wake up. The attack came 2 weeks later, from a direction Tracy never expected. She had settled into a new rhythm with Ha-Jun, cautious, careful, but real. He no longer pretended to be blind around her. He showed her his world, the legitimate business empire that funded hospitals and schools, and the shadow empire that kept Gwangju's streets safe from worse predators. I'm not a good man, he told her one evening, standing on the mansion balcony as the city lights glittered below. But I'm trying to be better than the alternatives. Tracy didn't know if she believed him, but she was beginning to understand him. Then his mother arrived. Madame Mia swept into the mansion like a winter storm, elegant, cold, and devastating. She wore a hanbok in deep navy, her hair pinned in an elaborate style that probably cost more than a fortune. Her eyes were Ha-Jun's eyes, but without the warmth Tracy had begun to glimpse in her son. So this is her, Madame Mia said, looking Tracy up and down like she was examining livestock. The African nurse. Tracy felt her spine stiffen. Ugandan, my name is Tracy. I know what your name is. Madame Mia turned to Ha-Jun, switching to rapid Korean that Tracy could barely follow. But she caught enough words to understand the tone. Disgust, disappointment, demands. Ha-Jun's responses were short, clipped, final. The conversation ended with Madame Mia storming out, her heels clicking against the marble like gunshots. What did she say? Tracy asked when the elevator doors closed. Ha-Jun was silent for a moment. Then he said, She wants me to end our arrangement. She says you're unsuitable, a liability, a stain on the family name. Tracy had expected something like this. It still hurt. And what did you say? He turned to face her, his expression strained. I told her that you're my wife, and that if she threatens you again, she'll discover exactly how much power I've accumulated while she thought I was blind. Tracy's heart stuttered. You said that? To your mother? I meant every word. She didn't know how to respond, so she did something she'd been wanting to do for days. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "Thank you," she whispered. At that moment, she wanted something more serious. She felt valued. "Don't thank me yet." His jaw tightened. "My mother doesn't accept defeat. She'll try something else." He was right. 3 days later, Tracy received a phone call from Kampala. Her mother's voice was frantic, barely coherent through the static. "They came to the hospital, men in suits. They said Kissa's surgery is canceled. They said the money was fraudulent. Tracy, what's happening? What did you do? Who did you defraud? What have you gotten yourself into?" Her mother's voice hummed through the phone. Tracy's blood turned to ice. She found Hajun in his study, surrounded by screens showing financial data and security feeds. When he saw her face, he was on his feet instantly. "What happened?" "My sister. The surgery. Someone canceled it." Her voice broke. "Someone told the hospital the money was fake." Hajun's expression went cold in a way she'd never seen before. Not angry, empty, like a door slamming shut on everything human. "My mother," he said quietly. "She moved faster than I expected." "Can you fix it? Can you? I don't want to lose my sister, please." "I'll fix it." He was already reaching for his phone. "I'll fly your sister here. The best surgeons in Korea. Tonight." "Hajun." "This is my fault." He met her eyes, and she saw something there that looked like anguish. "I brought you into my world. I made you a target. And now your sister is paying the price. It's not your fault. It's your mother's. She's my blood. Her sins are mine." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the fury burning in his eyes. "I will make this right, Tracy. I swear to you. Whatever it costs." He made calls, gave orders, moved mountains with nothing but his voice and his will. By midnight, a private plane was en route to Kampala. By morning, Kissa and Grace were in the air, flying toward Korea, toward safety, toward the surgery that would save Kissa's life. And Tracy stood in the mansion, watching the sunrise paint Gwangju in shades of gold and rose, and realized something that terrified her. She was falling in love with Kang Ha-jun. Not the mask, not the lie. The man underneath. He was such a kind man. Kissa's surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday. Tracy spent the night before in the hospital, holding her sister's hand, watching her sleep. Kissa looked so small in the hospital bed, so fragile, but she'd smiled when she saw Tracy. A real smile. The first one in months. "You found a way," Kissa had whispered. "You always find a way." Tracy hadn't told her about Hajun, about the contract marriage, about the lies and the danger and the impossible feelings growing in her chest. There would be time for that later, after the surgery, after Kissa was safe. Hajun came at dawn, bringing coffee and a quiet presence that Tracy had learned to lean on. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply sat beside her, his shoulder touching hers, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. The surgery took 8 hours. Tracy paced the waiting room until her legs ached. Ha-jun watched her with worried eyes, but didn't try to stop her. He understood that some fears couldn't be reasoned away. They had to be walked through, step by agonizing step. When the surgeon finally emerged, Tracy's heart stopped. "The tumor is gone," Dr. Park said, and Tracy's knees buckled. Ha-jun caught her before she hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her, holding her up when she couldn't hold herself. She sobbed into his chest, ugly, gasping sobs that shook her entire body, and he held her through all of it, his hand stroking her hair, his voice murmuring words she couldn't understand but somehow felt. "She's going to be okay," he said. "She is lucky. She is free now." "Thank you," she whispered in Ha-jun's ear. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I love you," he said. The words were simple, quiet, absolute. Tracy stared at him, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. She should be careful. She should protect herself. She loved him too, but her world and his were two different ones, including his mother's threats, all the reasons this couldn't possibly work. But she was so tired of being careful. "I love you too," she said. Hajun kissed her then, soft and slow and full of promise. Tracy kissed him back, letting go of the fear, letting go of the doubt, letting herself fall into something that felt like home. They didn't notice Madame Mia watching from the end of the corridor, her face twisted with fury. They didn't notice her reach for her phone. They didn't notice the storm that was about to break. But they would. Soon. Because Madame Mia had one final card to play, and she was about to play it. The confrontation came 3 days after Kissa's surgery. Tracy was in Hajun's study, helping him review documents for a new children's hospital he was funding in Kampala. A gift, he said, though she suspected it was more than that. A statement, a declaration, a way of saying that her world mattered to him as much as his own. The door burst open without warning. Madame Mia stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. Her face was a mask of cold triumph. "It's over," she announced. "I've contacted the immigration authorities. Your little nurse's visa expired 6 months ago. She'll be deported by morning." Tracy's blood ran cold. She'd known this was a risk, had always known, but hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. Hajun rose slowly from his desk. His expression was calm, but Tracy had learned to read the danger beneath his stillness. "Mother," he said quietly, "you should leave. I'm saving you from yourself. This woman is a gold digger, a fraud, She's my wife." The words cut through the room like a blade. Madame Mia laughed. "A contract marriage, a business arrangement, it means nothing. It means everything." Ha-Jun stepped around the desk, placing himself between Tracy and his mother. "I love her. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with her, and if you can't accept that, then you're no longer welcome in my home or my life." "You would choose her over your own blood?" "I would choose her over everything." The silence that followed was absolute. Tracy watched Madame Mia's face cycle through emotions, shock, rage, disbelief, and finally something that looked almost like fear. She had underestimated her son. She had thought his blindness made him weak, his kindness made him soft. She was wrong. "The immigration issue is already resolved," Hajun continued, his voice cold. "I filed for Tracy's permanent residency 3 weeks ago. As my legal spouse, she has every right to remain in Korea. Your threats are empty." "You planned this," Madame Mia breathed. "You knew I would try. I know you, Mother. I've always known you." He stepped closer, and for the first time, Tracy saw Madame Mia flinch. "You taught me to anticipate my enemies. You just never expected to become one." The older woman's composure finally cracked. Her eyes glistened with something that might have been tears or might have been fury. "I was trying to protect you from this woman. She will end you," she shouted. "No, you were trying to control me. There's a difference." Ha-Jun's voice softened just slightly. "I don't want to be your enemy, but I won't let you hurt the woman I love. Not now. Not ever." Madame Mia stared at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. The men in suits followed, and the door closed behind them with a soft click. Tracy released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "What just happened?" she asked. Hajun turned to face her, and the coldness melted from his expression, replaced by something warm and wondering. "With my mother? Probably not forever." He crossed the room and took her hands. "But with us, this is just the beginning." 6 months later, Tracy stood on the balcony of the mansion, watching the sun set over Gwangju. The city sprawled below her, glittering with lights that were just beginning to flicker on, and she marveled, as she did every evening, at how far she'd come from that cramped apartment in Seoul, from that hospital corridor in Kampala, from the girl who'd signed a contract without understanding what she was really agreeing to. Behind her, she heard laughter. Kissa was in the living room playing a video game with Hajun. She'd recovered fully from her surgery and had decided to stay in Korea for university, a decision that had made Tracy cry with joy. Their mother, Grace, was in the kitchen, teaching Hajun's chef how to make proper Ugandan groundnut stew. It wasn't the life Tracy had imagined. It was better. Hajun appeared beside her, sliding his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing." She leaned into him. "How strange life is. How it takes you to places you never expected." "Any regrets?" She turned to look at him. This man who had lied to her, protected her, loved her in ways she was still learning to understand. "Not one," she said. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, soft and slow, like they had all the time in the world. And they did. Because some stories begin with deception. Some stories begin with desperation. Some stories begin with a contract signed in fear and a lie believed in innocence. But the best stories, the ones worth telling, end with truth and love. We find love in unexpected places,